Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. My name is Spencer Walsh. Thank you so much for joining us here today. We got a good one for you on the agenda. The Democrats prepared a spending bill to keep the government funded past a Thursday deadline and continuing resolution kicking the can down the road. But moderates dug in harder in their hatred of this ambitious social safety net bill. We'll talk about what specifically Kristen Sinema is up to because, folks, we're going to let you in a little secret. She does not want this bill to pass, and people need to start realizing that. Also, U.S. sanctions have been blamed as Venezuela was dealing with currently a frozen order for medicine, as sanctions there just continue to cripple that country, a sign of the U.S. empire, kind of choking out various countries in the world that nobody talks about. And obviously, of course, it's socialism, communism, authoritarian, whatever you want to call it, just anything but U.S. State Department. Meanwhile, massive corruption going unnoticed in the Federal Reserve. Two top Federal Reserve officials retire after these trading disclosures. Eric Rosengren, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank in Boston, he said he would step down for health reasons. Robert Kaplan in Dallas said he would step down to avoid becoming distraction. And also, it will read an opinion piece about Israel and progressive Democrats. Should be fun. All right, let's get right into it. It's Newsflash. All right, we're starting today in Washington, where we got the Democrats preparing legislation on Wednesday to avert a government shutdown this week, but they're desperately trying to salvage President Biden's domestic agenda. Right now, if I had to say it, obviously, we have seen massive, big switches where people, hammer deals out in the middle of the night in Washington many, many times before, but smart money on this right now is looking like none of these two bills will pass, pretty much putting a big nail in the coffin in the Biden agenda, because this was so much of it right here in the social spending bill. A lot of stuff that he kind of knew he would not be able to pass, he kind of packed in to the reconciliation bill. So really, these conservative leaning holdouts dug. Just to say here, for the New York Times, the coverage change has really been quite remarkable over the past few days with Sinema and Manchin, as more of the Democratic base and establishment have started to get mad at them about this. Kind of, the left side of the Democratic establishment, just not the pure, hardcore, dyed-in-the-wool corporate people. They're not Democrats first, they serve corporate interests first. And, Sinema, we can safely, I think, assume is leading the charge for a lot of these people. But Sinema has been really, really brutal on this. Quite specifically, Manchin and, others have been following. So congressional leaders moved to address the most immediate threat, working to complete a bill to prevent government funding lapse at midnight on Thursday. Yet after days of intensive negotiations to bridge bitter differences in their party over President Biden's two biggest legislative priorities, the president and the top Democrats appeared as far as ever from an agreement on their marquee social policy package, which the White House calls the Build Back Better plan. That, in turn, was imperiling a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill that was scheduled for a House vote on Thursday. So that was supposed to be Monday. They pushed it back till Thursday. The fate of two measures could define the success of Biden's presidency, as intense negotiations surrounding them have posed a test of his skills as a deal maker, which highlighted as a calling card. He highlighted as a calling card during his campaign for the White House here. Again, this is in the New York Times. Emily Cochrane and Jim Tankersley, they have been, having a bit of a tough turn on the on some of these moderates, and really for the first time, something you never see in mainstream media is senators actually, or reporters actually talking about senators' fundraising habits and where they go. But even for Kristen Sinema, she was too shameless. Even the New York Times could not ignore the fact that she was literally going to, very brief fundraisers where money would just be piled on top of her. They were making it rain for 45 minutes real quick while Kristen Sinema was giving, I'm sure, a rapturous speech. And these, of course, were all the interests where she was about to vote against regulating. But yet, after the days of, these intensive negotiations, things just are not looking good. Those funders that have gone on the New York Times for her, people have been, in Arizona have been incredibly pissed at her. We'll get into all of that. Dramatizing the challenge, Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, leading hold on the social policy bill, issued a lengthy and strongly worded statement on Wednesday evening reiterating his opposition to the proposal as currently constituted, saying it amounted to fiscal insanity. Again, literally just going after all these incredibly old, boring, tired talking points that they've been using for the past year right now. And really what we've seen is no effort, not really, like a hardly concerted effort. I mean, he did recently, he was going to break the ground with the Obamas in Chicago, but he figured it would be, Biden was, for their library. It's like, ugh. But, he ended up canceling that trip to head over and apparently meet with Kristen Sinema more, didn't push Joe Manchin on a top line number, and just really did not get them to actually negotiate. Like, that's been the big complaint recently for progressives and people who want to see, a deal on this, is that there has not been any kind of real counteroffer. Like, anything they want, they're just met with lengthy statements, really weird and just strange behavior from Kristen Sinema. Lengthy statements about, the pay-fors from Joe Manchin, that it's kind of clear he's never really going to want to agree to any of these, because every single time, Biden goes out of his way to pay for something, with a tax, like a moderate tax rise on the Trump's tax cuts, not even bring them back to where they were before under Obama, you have Sinema and Manchin be like, oh, that's ridiculous. We will not take that. But this is fiscal insanity. Find another way to pay for it. Raising prescription drug prices, Sinema, no way, cannot happen. Or sorry, lowering actually negotiating prescription drug prices. Sinema standing out against that. Like, they're attacking the pay-fors and attacking the bill for not getting, paying for itself or whatever, but then they're attacking the pay-fors the Biden administration comes up with. Like, that is exactly, what is happening here. And, I think for a certain extent, Biden, and at least some of his political advisors have to know, the political dynamics at play here. They know what Sinema and Manchin's motivations are, but who knows what the hell they're going to do about it. While I'm hopeful that a common ground can be found that would result in another historic investment in our nation, I cannot and will not support trillions in spending on an all-or-nothing approach that ignores the... There's another bill that's passing that gives you exactly what you actually want. This is supposed to be... We pass a corporate giveaway bill and we pass a bill that actually has the Democratic elected president's agenda somewhere in it. That is the idea here. It's just really just demoralizing. It's I don't even know what to say. I'm hopeful that common ground can be found that would result in another historic investment in our nation. I cannot and will not support trillions in spending an all-or-nothing approach that ignores the brutal fiscal reality our nation faces. No care is given. It even sounds cliche to say this at this point. No care is given for the climate crisis our country faces, the healthcare crisis, the housing crisis, every other, COVID, infrastructure, all that stuff. All the things in this bill that, by the way, the Democrats have actually really done a horrible job of marketing, but there's really transformative stuff in here. But it's not perfect. It's a compromise, $3.5 trillion, as Bernie says. It was a compromise, but this is a bill that, it should be passed. But it's really, again, here we go. Attack on the pay-fors in the same freaking statement. Too much spending, but he's denouncing an approach that he said, quote, eventually tax for the sake of wishful spending. He doesn't want the spending to be spent. He doesn't want the investment to be made. This is what... this is his ideology. He is a conservative, reactionary Republican. There is no denying that at this point. The statement was a polar opposite of what Biden and top Democrats had hoped to extract from Manchin by the end of the week. Just, again, rudderless, completely, either they're, it's impossible, or they're not trying, and they're they're the most incompetent people in the world. I don't know how else to even explain or comprehend like what is going on right now. Instead, it's really further enraged progressives who already promised to oppose the infrastructure bill until Congress acted on the larger social plan, which looks like they will actually do. I'm assuming he's saying the president is insane because this is the president's agenda. Representative Pramila Jayapal, Democrat of Washington and the leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, said, and he doesn't have the excuse of always playing to a state here. Everything in this bill, including the entire bill itself, is relentlessly popular. It's incredibly popular. Like, there is no denying that. But still, this is what we get. She said, look, this is why we're not voting for the bipartisan bill until we get agreement on the reconciliation bill. It's clear we got a ways to go. So Pelosi, she used to be on the Jayapal side. She used to agree with that. She used to support the link in the bill. She has, completely crumbled like the Valenti, whatever the hell, ice cream that she loves so much. The impasse left unclear the fate of the infrastructure measure, with a handful of centrist Republicans pledging to support it. GOP leaders are urging their members to oppose it, leaving Democrats to hold a slim majority short of votes to pass the bill if progressives will vote. So we're talking about 50 progressives, a very small handful of centrist Republicans who are actually going to vote with the majority of Democrats on this one. The plan is to bring the bill to the floor, said Speaker Nancy Pelosi, telling reporters, 1 hour at a time. She said when she was concerned about the votes. She spoke shortly after the House passed legislation lifting a statutory limit on federal borrowing until December 16th, 2022, and after to avert a catastrophic federal debt default next month, when the Treasury Department says it will breach the current cap. Senate Republicans blocked a Democratic effort to pair the spending bill with the government funded, to keep the government funded, and are likely to oppose a House-passed bill, which is approved in a party line vote of 219 to 12 on Wednesday. But even as the party vote remained unresolved, Senate leaders scheduled a series of votes for Thursday morning legislation that would keep the government open through early December and provide crucial aid for disaster relief efforts in Afghan refugees. The House is expected to take up legislation soon afterward to avoid a shutdown on Thursday night. That's going to pass most likely. Much of the urgency on Wednesday was focused on salvaging the president's agenda, and after Biden was aides cleared to schedule on Wednesday an attempt to broker a deal among Democrats. Some Democrats have complained this week that the president has not engaged in talks to their satisfaction. Maybe a little bit too little too late from the White House here. He did not hold a group negotiating session. He met with them separately, maybe two groups of people, shouting each other in the room. That was a little too much for him to handle, especially if it was a little later in the day. But efforts by Biden and his team to pressure Manchin and Sinema have appeared to have fallen flat. Officials have been working for days to persuade their pair to specify how much they were willing to be willing to spend. So pretty much it's like they've been working for days to just get them to give them a number of how low they want to go. They're not even saying they're not going to go that low. And these people, they won't even say that. They won't even give them that. Like, it is incredible, psychotic, demented behavior. And Biden and the White House are just like, okay, whatever. However low you want to go. We're always here. We're just waiting for you. We're not going to threaten you with anything. We're not going to try and take away your political power in any serious way. Joe Biden should be down in Arizona attacking Kristen Sinema at rallies right now if he had any kind of smarts. Like, this is his legacy right here. If this doesn't pass, it's over. How are you not making more serious moves other than literally going to Biden and be like, how bad, or literally their biggest plan is going to these people over and over again who, again, don't want to see the bill passed in the first place and saying, how low do you want me to make it? Like, that is their best idea here. So the president felt it was constructive. They moved the ball forward. Felt there was agreement. Just said Jen Psaki, sounded kind of like a football coach after a lost game. Biden held conversations with various lawmakers throughout the day and plan to continue them on Thursday. Privately, administration officials said Biden was continuing to take an encouraging role with Manchin and Sinema and not demanding they agree to anything immediately. So, again, we're just going to sit there for whatever. Liberal Democrats right now are literally publicly fuming over their reticence at the moment. in a statement on Wednesday, Manchin said he wanted to set income thresholds for many of the social program expansions Democrats have proposed. He suggested they would be open to undoing some components of the 2017 tax cut, which is a little bit bigger than what Sinema has done. We've just been really doing nothing. In their latest effort, Democrats have proposed moving up the date for a process known as immigration registry, which allows otherwise law-abiding undocumented citizens who have been in the United States continuously since a certain date to adjust their status and get a pathway to citizenship. All right, let's move on now to our next story, and that is in Venezuela. A $12.7 million order of, in the intercept here, of critical medicines and medical supplies by Venezuela's Development Bank with the Pan American Health Organization has been held up for more than 2 months as an indirect result of U.S. sanctions. The request, frozen by Portuguese bank Novo Banco, covers more than 30 million syringes, 6 million vaccines against measles, mumps, and rubella, 5.5 million diphtheria tetanus vaccines, and 2 million polio vaccines, and as well as 1 million yellow fever vaccines. So pretty much things that, every other developed country, including like Venezuela, should be able to have this under any sort of, like, normal sort of circumstances, but the sanctions and the just imperial pressure of the United States has been too much that people very well may get sick and even die because of this. When faced with criticism over sweeping sanctions against Venezuela, the U.S. government often points to broad humanitarian exemptions in place, which it says allow for the free flow of food and medicines to those in need. But as the ongoing dispute over medical shipments illustrates, that's not always the case. We're seeing, again, clear examples with here and with Iran, especially in the run-up to COVID, where medical supplies were just plain not getting through, which is just criminal stuff, literally killing people. And if this doesn't piss people off, if this doesn't get people more and more into the camp of, Nicolas Maduro, he's not perfect, he's authoritarian, but at least, the United States is really the ones who are screwing us, not him. Like, it's not even productive to their own aims, which is, trying to screw up another person's country. So, which is, pretty much for their own, personal financial gain. Like, that is the point of a lot of what the U.S. government does. According to the documents shared with The Intercept, the Lisbon-based Novo Banco has for several weeks declined to approve a transfer from Portuguese lender to the Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO, a public health agency affiliated with the World Health Organization. Novo Banco did not respond to a request for comment, but according to critics within the European Parliament, the stalled transaction is evidence of both extensive reach and adverse effects of U.S. sanctions in Venezuela, tightened under the Trump administration and left in place by President Joe Biden. These restrictions weigh heavily on banks and financial institutions, even those operating outside U.S. borders. And really, the depressing thing about this is like how easy it is for these people to be able to do this and get away with this in such like a kind of unmolested way, because the United States pretty much controls the UN. No one in the world has the incentive or the power to stop this. It would be interesting to see, what happened if China started, giving vaccines to them, just bringing them over. But really, like, that is one of the biggest problems I have, like, with, the U.S. being the sole power in the world, is because when they do this stuff, like, when they put these sanctions on, when they blow up a family in Afghanistan like they did last month, there's nobody in the quote-unquote international community to actually hold them responsible and actually hold them accountable. I think after 40, 50, 60 years of doing that stuff uninterrupted, it's about time that someone does. I'm just going to say that. So Novo Banco's delay is part of a much larger conflict the bank has had with the Venezuelan government. Shortly after Juan Guaido declared himself the country's interim president and earned recognition from the U.S. and European Union, financial institutions across Europe froze assets belonging to the government of Nicolas Maduro or closely linked to it. These entities included Venezuela's state-run oil company and its public bank known as Bandes. So this includes roughly $1.7 billion at Novo Banco, a bank created in 2014 during Portugal's most recent financial crisis. 1/4 of this bank's ownership belongs to Portugal's Resolution Fund, a special state-backed fund to help stabilize the bank. The other 3/4 are owned by the American private equity firm Lone Star. Though the EU has no longer recognized Guaido as Venezuela's president since January, the impasse has dragged on at Novo Banco. According to a July ruling from a Lisbon judge, the Portuguese lender is explicitly authorized to approve transactions from Bonde, so as long as the transaction gets approval from a judge beforehand, that's precisely the process Venezuela's development bank aimed to initiate this summer. Novo Banco, I wonder who is getting in their ear there, just does not seem to want to budge. All right, we're going to be following that story for you there, courtesy of The Intercept. So, yeah, but we do have another story for you about the Fed after this.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to our segment to tell you all about what's going on here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network this summer. We do, as I'm sure you know, have a great lineup available for you. We, of course, start with our flagship show, Newsflash, all new Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Uncultured, irregularly back every Saturday with live music and sports analysis. With my co-host of the summer, Bennett Laxton. Hidden History will be brand new every Thursday on a bit of a hiatus, but will return shortly. It's the summer of podcasting. It's the summer of sounds. All you got to do is just keep listening wherever you get your podcasts, always here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about some of the corruption today in the Federal Reserve, and I have to say, it is very, very interesting just to really see, how widespread it is, or not widespread, but how much it flies under the radar so easily. So, here in NPR, a rare moment of ethical controversy, the public ones that actually get talked about, for the Federal Reserve. Two top officials resigned Monday in the wake of, and again, the headline says retire. Gotta love that. In the wake of revelations about the financial trading that exposed potential shortcomings in the Fed's rules on investments. Eric Rosengren, again, said he stepped down for health reasons, and Robert Kaplan said he didn't want to become a distraction. Two officials' financial disclosures sparked criticism from government watchdogs because they revealed extensive stock trading in 2020 when the Fed was spending trillions of dollars stabilizing financial markets and boosting the economy. Because of the trading, two officials could potentially have profited from the Fed's actions. So pretty much they initiated policy in a way that would have blatantly benefited them in terms of their stock trades, their investments. Same thing as what we saw with people like Dianne Feinstein, Richard Burr, and Kelly Loeffler. A throwback to her. So big throwback from January. But two officials' disclosures, they sparked the criticism. Though the investments by Rosengren and Kaplan were permitted under the Fed's rules, they raised, again, because it's not like it's the same thing in the Senate. They're literally allowed to do this. This is so abnormal, it's not talked about as if it's abnormal, is because it's not. People do this stuff all the time. This is completely legal corruption written into the system, where people are just able to do this. And it's reporters going through this. It's not a federal thing, because again, it's federally, you're allowed to do it. The restrictions on stock trading, because it actually is a big way these people make a lot of money, and especially the Fed, because they have so much unrecognized influence and power. We're looking at, the people who actually make money in the economy, they're looking at the Fed for policy. They're sure as hell not looking at freaking Congress, because they don't really make any policy. The people who made the most significant policy, especially in the last 2 years, especially economically, will be these people at the Fed. Fed Chair Jerome Powell will testify before the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, which includes Elizabeth Warren. So she's going to question him about that most likely. The resignations, though, will give Powell a specific response he can point to. The departure of Rosengren and Kaplan should ease pressure on Powell, who notably failed to express confidence in his presence at the news conference last week. So the president's 12 regional banks participate in the Fed's private policy-making meetings, in which they discuss central banks' interest rate policies and are privy to economic data not always available to the public. The Fed's decision can cause sharp swings in financial markets, so can the president's speeches and comments to the media. This is, again, all Fed presidents, not the Biden. So, they had a lot of power. They could do swings in the market with a single tweet, word at a press conference. People are watching what these guys say, and they are, literally legally allowed to say whatever they want and manipulate their bottom lines. Welcome to America, everybody.
Buckingham Palace has announced the death of His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh.
It's news flash.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a piece for you today, a guest essay in the New York Times from Robert Wexler. We're going in cold here. The title, for progressives, Iron Dome isn't the issue. It's Israel itself. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, no, right? Yeah, so... I do have problems with it. I'm going to admit, I do have problems with Israel that stretch beyond the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome, definitely not the worst thing Israel's involved in. So Robert Wexler is the president of the S. Daniel Abrams Center for Middle East Peace in Washington, D.C., and a former Democratic representative from Florida. It would be a mistake to conclude that the sky is falling on the U.S.-Israel relationship or the Democratic Party has distanced itself from Israel simply because a handful of progressive members from the Congress recently challenged funding to resupply Israel's Iron Vote system. Iron Dome missile defense system. It does turn out, though, that Israel does have an Iron Vote because the vote, the funding passed overwhelmingly. I think that is the right case. Anyone saying that, the Democratic Party is completely switched on Israel, no, that's ridiculous. And again, but the idea that many Americans are shocked and chagrined that AOC did not, or not even AOC, Ilhan Omar or whatever held up the Iron Dome funding, that's ridiculous. Nobody cares. Got news for you. And yet it would be an even bigger mistake to ignore the fact that the debate over the Iron Dome system represents a tectonic shift in the discourse among Democrats, one that's likely to shape U.S.-Israel relations for decades. It will definitely shape the tenor of the discourse, which is probably all progressives are going to be actually able to do at the moment. That is quite clear, I think, because, they only have, 9 votes voted against that, and there was one Republican involved with that. So, yeah, these progressives probably aren't going to be able to do too much to the Iron Dome in the near term, but, that discourse change is going to be a big, big deal in terms of the way, Israel's discussed, and that's going to bother a lot of these people who are big Israel, defenders. I'm assuming this guy is. Indeed, a small group of progressive Democrats have now forced a simmering debate within the party and in their constituency to the surface. The debate within the Democratic Party is about America's once unflinching support for Israel and about what a relationship looks like at a time when support for a two-state solution, two-state outcome is waiting among Israelis and Palestinians. True there in both regards. People don't talk about that. Israel is just dying for a two-state solution. Oh, please, come on, thank you. No, there's no evidence of that. Israel, wants, they want as much as they can get. Put it that way. For this debate to lead to a successful outcome for both Israelis and Palestinians, the Biden administration must take robust action to create a two-state reality on the ground, one that gives all wings of the Democratic Party a stake in stability for security, and security for all within Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. That means helping Israel and the Palestinian Authority. First of all, Palestinian Authority is viewed by pretty much every single Palestinian, and justifiably so, a joke organization that no one there supports. So any negotiations with the Palestinian Authority would be probably junk from the start. And you know what? Rightfully so, because the Palestinian Authority, clearly has been bought off by Israel. And guys, I'm gonna say it: Hamas, they're not perfect. They're not the ideal leaders. I would prefer a secular, Fatah type government in Hamas to, in Gaza to a religious extremist one. But the fact remains that Palestinians support Hamas way, way more than support the PA. That's just a fact. So that means helping Israel and the PA to improve the lives of their people without compromising security, as well as to narrow the political disagreements between the sides. Improvement in jobs, freedom of movement, technology, and water, freedom of movement, technology, water, and security can be achieved under the rubric of what has been called the shifting of the conflict, an idea that Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and senior coalition partners have embraced. Even so, I don't know what strengthening. I feel like strengthening conflict means just closing off resources further from Palestinians. But it's definitely like 73% of Israelis thought the May bombing campaign should have gone on longer. Like, this is not a population that is really trying to make peace, trying to have security or stability. It's just not. Even so, the Iron Dome was never the intended target. The system was defensive. It protects countless numbers of innocent Israelis from Hamas rockets and saved numerous innocent Palestinians by avoiding even more punishing Israeli military responses to these attacks. Again, a really classically sick and psychotic response to say that the reason why, if you're using that logic and you really care deeply about the fate of Palestinians, why not have the U.S. fund an Iron Dome program for the Palestinians? Because we care about their lives, right? We want to see them defended from Israeli rockets. And the idea that Israel has become less militant, as we talked about a few shows ago with the Iron Dome, it's just not true. If you look at any kind of casualty comparison from the time where Israel got the Iron Dome, they became more militant. They became more aggressive because they knew that whatever firecrackers Hamas was sending over would have a much better chance of landing if the Iron Dome wasn't there. So they were pretty much free to shoot with impunity, knowing that their opponents were, and their occupied party was pretty much unable to resist, unable to defend itself. The irony of the timing of the Iron Dome rupture within the Democratic Party is that the new Israeli coalition government, which includes an Arab Israeli minister and the leader of the Islamist Party, appears amenable to taking steps to improve conditions for Palestinians. In the summer, I had the opportunity to sit down with Prime Minister. Let's see. It's my understanding, based on both meetings, that both sides are committed to making progress for the first time in years. Guys, they're committed to making progress. We're committed to making great, vague, positive statements, and then we should all be happy. While IDF forces have continued to carry out raids against Hamas that have killed civilians, they have limited the number of nighttime incursions in the West Bank. The number of permits issued to Palestinians to work in Israel has increased in the past 2 months, and the Israeli Supreme Court has offered a compromise in the case of evictions of Palestinians in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East Jerusalem. So pretty much, a slightly less bad status quo is what this guy is advocating for. No, thank you. Goodbye, you're out of here. That's all the time we got for you guys today. Thank you so much for joining us. Gotta go. See you later.